Okay. All right. Just trying to get all my pieces of technology in place here. I'm going to follow along on my slides on my phone just so I can not lose track of where I am. So, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone in person. Good morning, everyone online. Awesome to see everybody today. What a fantastic service. That was just, that was exciting and really wonderful. I'm going to open us up in a word of prayer and then we'll get going. Father God, I just pray for this morning, for the folks who just went through baptism, Lord. I just pray that you just encourage them so much. Lord, give us a desire to follow them in baptism, that you commanded it and we should do it. Lord, I just, being a member of the body is so fantastic. Lord, I just give you praise. Lord, I just pray for this morning's journey class. Just ask that you give me the words to say. Lord, this is not about me. This is about you and the powerful, mighty works that you are doing in body here at South Park Church. And I just pray that you would just be in this meeting today. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. Thank you, folks. All right. So I'm going to just put up a slide here. That this is what we came up with. Dorothy did a fantastic job really describing kind of the problem of where we've been for this last year. COVID has had such a profound impact on society. I think everybody has been affected by it in different ways. And I've just seen so much with people experiencing loneliness and loss and anxiety and stress. It has really put people, a lot of people, in a really rough spot. And I think there's the good and the bad. I mean, nobody wants to be in a bad situation like that, but people have come to realize they need God, they need Jesus, and people are coming forward realizing I can't do this on my own. So that is definitely a plus that out of that trial, people are turning to God. And this week we're going to talk about, with people being affected by this, how can they surrender their struggles to Jesus and to fill that void. And we're going to talk about how God has given us Celebrate Recovery as a way to help guide people through that process. So this is actually, this is from the CDC. This is actually from back in June. So this was from the summer. So obviously things are even worse probably now because we've had a whole nother half a year plus. But they were reporting that for the number of individuals reporting one or more negative mental or behavioral experiences, and obviously that could be depression, anxiety, anything like that, there's actually a separate breakout for anxiety and depression, trauma symptoms, suicidal thoughts, substance abuse. It's just the pandemic has just been really, really rough on a lot of people. I think even in non-pandemic times, people struggle with life. And I think the pandemic has sort of been like a magnifying glass. It's just made everything, some things that are good, it's made even better. A lot of people have been really connected, hyper-connected during the pandemic because there's so many online meetings and online church. And I know folks who are literally 5 days a week, 7 days a week, that have got 3 things today. They're super connected, more connected than they've ever been. But on the flip side, it's been devastating for a lot of people, and I think it has magnified the struggle as well for a lot of people. It magnifies our character defects, it brings out the worst in us, and it magnifies our negative tendencies. One of the biggest things I think about specifically why the pandemic has been so rough on people is the isolation. The isolation, pandemic or not, feeds depression, anxiety, and addiction. It's like one of the huge, it's like putting gasoline on a fire. Isolation just really feeds it. Whatever struggles you have, isolation makes it worse. And that's outside of the pandemic. But the pandemic is like isolation on steroids. If you're struggling with loneliness or anxiety or depression or being, this isolation a whole year of not being connected to people has just made everything much, much worse. So I found this quote, whoops. The magnifying glass. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, that was the slide. The magnifying glass. Yes, that was what that was meant to represent. That's what happens when I don't keep up with my slides. I found this quote online. I really like it. This was from the 17th century philosopher and mathematician Blaise Pascal. And I think this is the origin of the God-shaped void that is in every man that you've heard about, but this is like the original. What else does this craving and this helplessness proclaim but that there was once in man a true happiness, of which all that now remains is the empty print and trace? This he tries in vain to fill with everything around him, seeking in things that are not there, the help that he cannot find in those that are, though none can help. Since this infinite abyss can be filled only with an infinite and immutable object, in other words, by God himself. And I think that is the root of the problem, trying to fill that void with other things when the only thing that is meant to fill that void is God himself. So for a lot of us, our lives left to our own devices look a lot like this. You know, we struggle with, you know, sadness, loneliness, bitterness, resentment, anger, you know, controlling behaviors, all the different things that we all struggle with, perfectionism, an endless list of things we can get lost in. And we're trying to, you know, why is my life better? Why am I struggling like this? Why won't my spouse talk to me? Why have my kids alienated? Why have, you know, and we don't really have a map. We just sort of randomly bounce from one thing to another, wondering why we can't figure it out. But the good news is there is a way to get clarity in this and to get help. But you know, all these things that I've talked about, you know, these coping mechanisms, and even what Blaise Pascal talked about in the 17th century, these coping mechanisms become idols that control us. And whatever that is for you, that behavior, you know, anger, sarcasm, codependency, binge watching TV, it really doesn't matter. Whatever that behavior is, that is your way of dealing with life. Some people become sarcastic, some people become angry, some people become bitter, some people drink, some people overeat. You know, there are many different ways of coping. Those things become idols and they control us. We don't control them. And then we discover that we can't break free, even if we want to. And isn't that the classic thing where people say, I can stop anytime I want to? It's like, well, go ahead then. Yeah, show me. Yeah. And then 6 days later, they're back there. Well, I did stop for 6 days, but you know, I showed you I could do it, but it's like, but I don't want to stop. So you know, the thing is that these behaviors that we do, whether it's sarcasm, anger, control, binge watching, overeating, drinking, pornography, gambling, you name it, these are not the actual thing itself. They're just the symptoms, right? They're the symptoms. So if you go to the doctor, there's a difference between the symptoms and the cause. If you have a rash, you know, yeah, he can give you some cream for the rash, but you'll be back in 2 weeks and you still got the rash, because whatever it was that was causing it, you haven't dealt with the underlying cause. If I walk down the side of my house every day to go to my car and I walk past poison ivy, you know, I'm going to keep getting a rash. So, you know, the rash is just the symptom. What is the cause? You know, cut back the poison ivy. What is causing you to behave like this, to try to self-medicate? You know, if you just treat the symptoms, not the cause, then the symptoms will almost certainly come back again. So what are the underlying issues that we try to self-medicate our way out of with these behaviors? So enter CR. This is where, you know, Celebrate Recovery is really, honestly, it's for anything that comes between you and God or you and man. You know, and when I say man, I mean mankind, any man or womankind, you know, the CR, anything that comes between your relationship with God or your relationship with others. If there is something that persistently gets in that relationship, then that's what CR is for. Those of you guys who have been around South Park Church for probably more than 10 years may remember one of our former elders and licensed clinical professional counselor, Jill Murchie, who liked to say that everyone in church on a Sunday morning could use Celebrate Recovery. She is a professional clinical counselor, saw a lot of folks, and Christians or not, and knew that Celebrate Recovery is really for everyone. So in Luke 4:18, Jesus said, of course, I'm behind on my slides. Okay. In Luke 4:18, Jesus said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, and that the oppressed will be set free." And God does set the captives free. And in this case, God sets us free from our hurts, our hang-ups, and our habits. Now, the hurts are the anger, bitterness, resentment, the things we carry with us. The hang-ups are our coping mechanisms, the way we try to deal with it, the things that we struggle with, the habits, the addictions, the behaviors. Dealing with our hurts and resentments, guilt, shame, and character defects is possible. We just need to know the way to do that. And when you do deal with those things through the power of God, then freedom and victory and peace and joy is real. And it's possible, and it's wonderful. And when you see people's lives changed, it's awesome. So that's where we get into Celebrate Recovery. God uses Celebrate Recovery to give us a roadmap of how to get there from here, how to tackle these things. You know, when I was a younger believer, I came to Christ when I was 30 years old, and I was blown away. I was so excited and so on fire, and I wanted to, tell everybody. And I used to feel like, if I found somebody that was struggling with something, I could just give them a Bible and say, all the answers are in here. Go get them, Tiger. This is all you need is the Bible. It's all in here. And I was right. The answers are all in there. But most people, when you hand them a Bible and say, here it is, figure it out, they're like, I don't know where to start. Like, what am I supposed to do? Yes, I've got issues. Yes, I believe you. The answers are in there. But how do I deal with that? So that's where Celebrate Recovery is sort of a roadmap. It's a guidebook. It shows you step by step how to get there from here. So really, it's a process of surrender. And that's what Celebrate Recovery walks you through. Celebrate Recovery started 30 years ago at Saddleback Church in Lake Forest, California. And at that time, the church was meeting at a high school gym. And Pastor John Baker wrote to Pastor Rick Warren the now famous, concise, 13-page, single-space letter outlining the vision that God had given Pastor John for Celebrate Recovery. And after reading John's letter, Pastor Rick said, "Great, John, go do it." As the moral of the story is when you suggest something like that, be prepared for somebody to volunteer you, right? But now, 30 years later, this is the 30th anniversary of Celebrate Recovery. There are 35,000 Celebrate Recovery churches around the world, and that number continues to grow. And Celebrate Recovery, being a movement that's bringing the healing power of Jesus Christ to the hurting and broken. Over 5 million people have gone through a step study. So 5 million people. The step study is like the small group curriculum version of Celebrate Recovery. So that's pretty cool. And definitely one of the everybody knows about all the secular programs, AA and NA and all the other, but Celebrate Recovery is actually a hugely, we even heard this morning and during the baptism, we got a shout out for Celebrate Recovery. Very excited, some cheering down here, definitely. So what kind of stuff does Celebrate Recovery deal with? Well, like I said, really, in the words of Joe Murchie, anything. Everyone who is in church on Sunday morning, as Joe Murchie said, could benefit from Celebrate Recovery. Addiction, anger, codependency, eating disorders, food addiction, love and relationship addiction, physical abuse, alcohol, drugs, sexual addiction, but it's also things like perfectionism, anxiety, depression. I mean, I've known folks come to CR who don't even know what they struggle with. They come because they don't feel right, because life is not good. They're unhappy. Something's not right. They They need Christian community. They need God in their life. They know that they're miserable and they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And they come to CR, not even knowing what it is that they're struggling with. And they find the help at Celebrate Recovery. So all that to say that Celebrate Recovery is not just about those that struggle with drugs and alcohol. Secular programs like AA and NA and SA and GA and OA and all the other A's, you know, they're dedicated to a specific thing: alcohol, drugs, you know, sexual addiction, overeating. And they only do the one thing. The genius of Pastor John Baker, who went through AA for many, many years, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous, before he became a pastor and started Celebrate Recovery, was the realization that the roots of all these things are the same. It doesn't matter what you're struggling with, that it's not the symptom, it's the cause. It's not about addressing the symptom, it's about addressing the cause. And the cause is the same. It's Blaise Pascal. Every man has a God-shaped void. And we try to fill that. We try to self-medicate using things. So whether it's drugs, alcohol, pornography, gambling, we're simply trying to, so Celebrate Recovery tries to take it back to what is the cause. So at Celebrate Recovery national level, they say that 2/3 of the people who come to CR, 2/3 of the people who come to CR are not struggling with substance abuse. And I would say for our Celebrate Recovery, that's about right, actually. May even be more people than that who are not struggling with substance abuse. The majority of people are just dealing with life issues. And, you know, definitely drugs and alcohol can be part of that, but it really can manifest in many different ways. So like I said, that could be food, anger, anxiety, depression, lust, pornography, codependency, gambling, and many, many other issues. And I think that probably the sort of underlying thing here is that the common factor is that people coming to meetings are there because they have been hurt by people. People come to meetings because they have been hurt by people. And many people attending the meetings have hurt people. So I guess I could ask the question of you guys, whether you're online or here in person, have you been hurt by people? Have you hurt people? It's like, if you've been hurt by people or have been hurt or have hurt people, then guess what? You know, you're qualified, eminently qualified to come to CR. I think that's if you're standing up and walking around and breathing, then you've probably got all the issues that we all have that make it. So one of the things I talked about was codependency. So I'm just going to give you a lot of people don't know what codependency is. They've heard the word. And I remember I've heard a number of people actually share with me that they didn't know what it was. They'd heard about codependency. And then they saw somebody do a presentation on it, like a person sharing a testimony. And they're like, oh, wow, that's me. You know, so I think codependency is one of those things that once you know what it is, you're like, whoa. You know, and I think a lot of us have some of that in us to some extent or another. So codependency in its broadest sense is an addiction to people, behaviors, and things. And it's the fallacy that you're trying to control your inward feelings by controlling people, places, and things on the outside. That if I can make everyone get along, if I can make everything turn out the way I want it to, if I can control everything, then I'm going to feel better. If people aren't angry at me, if people like me, you know, there's many aspects to this. A lot of times people worry excessively about what people think of us, and that getting our self-worth from what others think of us is not what God says. You know, that is us substituting a false God. If we are so worried that it kind of ruins our life, that we're constantly running around trying to make sure that everybody thinks the best of us, and, you know, I've got to say yes to everybody, and I've got to try to, you know, always put on the best show, that becomes very difficult and painful and hard to live up to that. And it's a false God. You know, it's not how you're supposed to live. So, you know, that inability to say no, the people pleasing, conflict avoidance, enabling people's bad behavior because you can't say no to them. You know, you're unable to set and hold boundaries for people. You know, I think everybody's had that sort of toxic person in their life who runs rampant over every boundary you try to set. They just don't take no for an answer. trying to fix people, control people, manipulate people, trying to get the desired outcome. And a lot of times, we do it because we think it's for their own good. I know, you don't know. Listen to me. I know the answer. You just have to do what I tell you. So as a codependent, we have to learn that our self-worth is not based on the work that we do or the service that we perform. Our self-worth comes through Jesus Christ. Service, as in Christian service, as in caring for others, is supposed to be an active choice. Codependents need to act rather than react. So when you're reacting to other people because of how it makes you feel or how to control the situation, so a lot of it comes down to the motive of why you do what you do. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. Honestly, as I read that, it's kind of semi-autobiographical. I could recognize a lot of myself in those things. I've done many of those things at one time or another. So, all right, what makes Celebrate Recovery different than any other recovery program? So this is from Pastor Rick Warren. He gives the 6 uniques of Celebrate Recovery. Celebrate Recovery is based on God's word, the Bible. Obviously, a lot of the secular programs talk about your higher power, and famously, there's sort of jokes from AA about, my higher power is my Harley, or my higher power is my doorknob, but all joking aside, those programs did start as Christian-based programs, but in order to attract the maximum number of people, they have sort of backpedaled on the God end of things. So there are a lot of people, some CRs are okay with you talking about God or Jesus. Some AAs are okay with you talking about God or Jesus. Other ones kind of frown on it a little bit because they don't want to upset anyone who's attending. So, but at Celebrate Recovery, it's all about Jesus. God is number one. God is the one person that we worship, and Celebrate Recovery is unashamedly about God and the amazing work on the cross of Jesus, who's reconciled us to God. So the Bible is number one with Celebrate Recovery. Celebrate Recovery is forward-looking, right? So it's not, yes, we have to examine the past in order to understand how we got here, but once we have understood the unhealthy behaviors and how we got here and what are the underlying causes, we are looking forward. This is about how do we live the rest of our lives in relationship with God. Celebrate Recovery emphasizes responsibility. So this is about you and your relationship with God and your relationship with others. This is not about blaming others for where you are. And it emphasizes spiritual commitment to Jesus Christ. This is about your walk with Christ for the rest of your life. Celebrate Recovery uses that biblical truth that we need each other to grow spiritually and emotionally. And that is 100% true, that recovery, life itself, it needs to happen in a Christian community. We need others in our walk. You can't do this on your own. And then Celebrate Recovery addresses all types of hurts, hangups, and habits. Like I said, really the common causes, the different symptoms, but the common cause of what it is that makes us act this way. So typically during non-COVID times, we typically have about 30 to 40 attendees up on the 3rd floor. We've done it in the past. Now we've started meeting in person again. We're doing the hybrid, kind of like we're doing here. And we've started meeting in this room on Monday nights. This last Monday was our first time back in person. And so, we typically have about 20, 25, 30 people on the hybrid model, where right now, last week, it was 50-50 in terms of the number of online attendees versus in person, but I'm sure the numbers will change over time. COVID times, like I said, 20 to 30, non-COVID times, typically 30, 40, depending. Like I said, we've had a lot of new attendees, folks coming during COVID. I'm literally every week I'm getting calls and emails and text messages from people reaching out. Some I know, some I don't know, some I haven't seen in a long time, saying, hey, are you guys meeting? I would love to come. I need to be there. I need to be with you guys. And people coming to CR because they recognize their need. a year of this pandemic, of being isolated and struggling with anger, depression, despair, resentments, or just all of the things, coming back and connecting with people in a Christ-centered atmosphere where you're learning about how to live your life for God in Christian community and surrender those struggles that we all have to Him. So that's what Celebrate Recovery is all about. We start our meetings on Monday nights at 7 p.m. We have, I'm just going to give you a quick outline of what a CR meeting looks like. And just to say, you guys are all welcome to come to a CR meeting. The large group meeting, which I'm about to describe, is open to everyone. Anyone and everyone is welcome to come. Then we break out into small groups, and the only requirement is if you're working on your issues, then you're welcome to stay for the small groups. If you don't have any issues, then you're in denial, and you should be in a small group, but that's okay if you don't think you've got any issues. We'll ask your spouse, they'll tell us what your issues are, or your family, your kids. Somebody knows what your issues really are. So we have our large group meeting at 7 p.m. Like I said, that's open to anyone and everyone. And we read either the 8 principles or the 12 steps and their biblical comparisons, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And then we have worship. And then each week in the large group meeting, we alternate between teachings and testimonies. We follow the CR curriculum and we do teachings and then testimonies on the other weeks. And then after the large group meeting, that's when we break out into what we call open share groups. The men and the women meet separately, and folks get a chance to just share whatever is going on with them or what they thought of the teaching or testimony, or it's totally okay to say, I pass. You might not be in the mood to share anything, or you might be new, or you're embarrassed, or you feel awkward. That's totally okay. It's okay to say, I pass. It's okay. No one's going to be upset. But when you hear others share, you are going to be able to relate to what others are going through. You are going to be given hope by what people are experiencing and by the testimonies and the teachings. You are going to learn new things. And I think you've probably all had this at church, right? Where you don't really want to go to church and you're tired and it's been a long week and you're kind of grumpy. And then you go to church and you love it. And it's like, wow, the pastor was talking to me today. I'm sitting there and he's talking right to me. We get that with CR all the time, right? Folks are like, I wasn't going to come tonight. It's been a long day at work and I just barely got home for dinner and I came straight to CR and I'm frazzled and irritated. And then they're blown away. God speaks to them through CR, through the teaching, through the testimony, through the people at the meeting. All right, so I already mentioned the open share groups that I was just talking about, that we break out after the large group meeting into these gender-specific open share groups. The other thing that I talked about earlier was the step studies. So just to, step studies are slightly different, right? So after the large group meeting on a Monday night, we break out into the open share group so folks get to share. The step studies are also single gender, men's step studies, women's step studies, but they run throughout the year. Those are more like a small group. That's where you're meeting on a different night of the week as a group. There could be 6 or 8 or 10, depends on the size of the group of guys, or 6 or 8 or 10, depends on the size of the group of gals. Meeting on a day of the week, could be a Thursday, could be a Friday, or whatever day of the week, that Tuesday, whatever day they're meeting on their own time to go through the curriculum as a small group. And when you do that, that is something else again. Being on a Monday night, listening to the teachings and testimonies, listening to the open share group, doing your share in the open share group, 3 to 5 minutes you get to share. That's awesome. That helps keep you in the game, keep your head on straight. But the step study groups are where the rubber hits the road. Now you're doing a long-term small group with a bunch of people that you're going to be with, working through the curriculum. And that's where you're really getting to deep dive this stuff, really get to understand. You're working on yourself, you're learning from others, you're learning from God. That the step studies are really where you make a lot of growth, a lot of traction. So I just encourage you, when you hear about step studies coming up, that those are something you might want to think about getting into. In our meetings, whether it's the open share groups or the step study groups, any of our meetings, we use the 5 small group guidelines. So this is part of CR. If you come to a CR meeting, you will see these. This is about keeping your sharing focused on your, I've used these 5 small group guidelines in many other, we use a version very similar to these at Ironman. We've used these in some other church type meetings as well. These are great guidelines. Keep your sharing focused on your own thoughts and feelings. This is not about what this guy did or that guy did or the other person. It's their fault. They've got a problem. This is about you, your thoughts and feelings. No crosstalk. Crosstalk means interrupting. So give people the opportunity to share without interrupting them. We're here to support each other, not try to fix each other. Especially, that means you guys. The guys, the temptation, whoa, you should do this, and you know what you're doing wrong. It's like, nope, that's not part of it. Do not, when you're sharing, it's not your job to tell everybody else what they're doing wrong. So no share, no fixing people. Anonymity and confidentiality are basic requirements. What's shared in the group stays in the group, obviously. Nobody wants to come to CR and then find out something. Hey, did you hear something? No, anonymity and confidentiality, job 1 at Celebrate Recovery. And of course, offensive language has no place in a Christ-centered recovery group. So, just talking, a bit about myself in the pandemic. I've worked from home for the last year. Actually, back in March of last year, I got COVID from my brother-in-law got it from somebody who just came back from Italy, and then everybody in the house got it. So happy COVID-versary to me. So I've had my shots as well. So like Pastor Michael Allen, I'm now the safest guy you can imagine. I've had COVID and I've had the shots. But working from home for an entire year, just every day, my wife's working, my brother-in-law's working. I'm stuck upstairs in my office / music room, and just like never getting out. My wife is at work all week, comes home on the weekend. She's like, oh, I just want to stay home. I'm like, stay home, please. I've been stuck here. I just want to go out. It's like, I think I drove my car in this last year. I drove my car something like 5 times. I went into the office like 5 times in a year. My brother-in-law is like, I'm like, yeah, I'm going into work tomorrow. He's like, yeah, you might want to blow off the cobwebs on your. I'm like, yeah, that's funny. No, they actually were like my car was like welded to the sidewalk with cobwebs from had been there so long. So but that I have felt isolated and lonely and disconnected from everything. It definitely leads to depression and frustration and anger and sarcasm. I definitely own that one, because why isn't everybody feeling like me? And where have you been, and why are you so happy? It's like you feel so isolated and cut off and disconnected. You may have heard of the freshman 15 when you go to college and you gain 15 pounds. Well, you've heard of the COVID-19, right? I think I've definitely been a victim of the COVID-19. That's a real thing. Binge watching, right? So like binge watching TV, Netflix, like what else is there to do, right? You can't go out. There's nowhere to go. You can't be with people. You can't go to a restaurant. So it's just brought a lot of negative behaviors. And I keep finding things that I need to surrender to God. I have to admit that I'm powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing. That's a quote right out of Celebrate Recovery. I have to admit that I'm powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing. Like Paul said in Romans 7:15, what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. So how do I get past living like this, repeating the mistakes of the past and living with hurts, regrets, or bitterness? And this is one of my favorite quotes from Jill Murchie, another Jill Murchie quote. And I'd have to do Jill Murchie doing an impression of her Swedish grandmother, so you'll have to bear with me. She said, in the words of her Swedish grandmother, it's simple, but it's just not easy. So I don't know how good a job I did there. But, Paul ends Romans 7 with the passage, who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? Thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord. And that has got to be my answer as well. All the struggles that I have to turn to Jesus to deliver me. And when I surrender all of those issues to him and live for him daily, then he desires to, and he can, and he will heal me from those hurts, habits, and hangups. And that is what CR gives you a roadmap for. You know, CR is a guided process of self-examination, surrendering our issues and character defects to God, and discovering the root causes of our issues. And during that process, we learn the principles and habits of how we should live the rest of our lives, walking in joy, peace, and victory in a right relationship with God and man. So this is not about a quick fix. This is not about, you know, I've gained a lot of weight, I'm going to go on a crash diet and then lose 20 pounds, and then 3 weeks later, I've gained it all back. This is about a life change of surrendering to God. And just as salvation is an event, but sanctification is a daily thing, in the same way, recovery is a lot of times reaching that point in time where we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we're done repeating the same mistakes over and over and feeling the guilt and shame and the consequences, and then learning and living into the process of living a lifestyle of surrendering to God. Recovery is a process. It's a set of daily choices. It's not a one-time event. We seek progress, not perfection. Some of you guys, it was actually Easter 8 years ago, Pastor Eric did a sermon called The Two Roads. And it was about the road of pleasing God that leads to the room of good intentions versus the road of trusting God that leads to the room of grace. And his sermon 8 years ago was inspired by the book, The Cure. What if God isn't who you think he is, and neither are you? I love, when I heard that sermon 8 years ago, I was actually doing the AV stuff. And so I had a copy of his sermon. So I was like, I'm snagging that one. That's CR right there. So I actually grabbed that sermon that Pastor Eric did. I said, hey, can I use this in CR? He's like, absolutely. So I actually took that sermon and turned it around and used it as a special teaching in CR, because that sermon really embodies what the purpose of surrendering to God, what Celebrate Recovery is all about. So if we had an extra hour, I would walk you through that sermon because it was that good. It really was. You know, but the gist of it was that there were two paths. The two paths in the picture: the road of pleasing God and the road of trusting God. And the road to the left, pleasing God. So like, you know, pleasing God. I mean, that sounds good, right? I mean, like, who wouldn't want to please God? I mean, you think about everything God's done for us. Trusting God, that just sounds like, well, all I'm doing is trusting. So that sounds like I'm not actually doing anything. It's like, it's too easy. It's got to be a trap. So the whole sermon kind of works through that whole process. And it turns out that, you know, to call a long story short, that it's not really what you think it is, kind of like the title of the book. So there are the two paths that you could go by. The pleasing God, trying to do all the things that you think will please God, or trusting in God. And what you might find is that the one path is not what you think it is. Trying harder, trying to please God, do the right things in the right order, to check all the boxes, to make God love you, is not actually, you actually have to take the other path. So you could really say that there are two paths that you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. So I don't know if any of you recognize that, but that was actually from Led Zeppelin, so Stairway to Heaven. So I figured, you know, we're kind of on the Stairway to Heaven here, right? So that seemed appropriate. It may also count as the first reference to Led Zeppelin in the Journey class. But I'm not going to go down the whole sermon that Pastor Eric did about the two roads, although I might open that one back up for Celebrate Recovery one week, because that was awesome. But basically, our journey on the road to recovery is based on faith and on grace. And it's not about trying harder to please God and to please man and struggling and failing repeatedly in our own deficient willpower. It's not about trying harder, using our willpower because using our willpower will not succeed. And you might get by for a day or a week or a month or 6 months trying harder. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make the same mistakes. But eventually you will fail. You will fall back on the old behaviors and you will make the same mistakes. Recovery is not about sin management. It's about surrender. And, the word says that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It doesn't say through my own willpower, right? It's through Christ who strengthens me, not my own willpower. The little strength and willpower that I have isn't enough for me to be able to fix myself. But fortunately, what little strength and willpower that I do have is just enough for me to surrender myself daily to God and keep coming back. And that is what I should use my little strength and willpower for, surrendering daily and turning myself to God, not trying to fix myself. God does all the heavy lifting. God is the one that transforms us by the renewing of our minds. As Jesus said in John 6:29, the word of God is this, to believe the one that he has sent. That's it. The work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. That's it. That's all there is. That seems too simple, doesn't it? Our work is to believe in the one that God has sent, Jesus. Well, like I said, it's simple, but it just isn't easy to actually live it out. So our part is being willing to let God change us and to keep showing up. Like I said earlier, we're designed to do life, recovery together in Christian community. We bear one another's burdens, we confess our sins to each other, and pray for each other so that we can be healed, as it says in James 5:16. Recovery and life is not a Lone Ranger activity. It doesn't work, I guarantee it. So just gonna kind of tease us into next week, where I'll be talking about the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes and what Celebrate Recovery calls the 8 principles. So if you look at Matthew 5:3-10, these are the Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount. And we've all seen them, we're all familiar with them. Pastor Eric did a sermon series on these not long ago. And I know for myself, before Celebrate Recovery, I looked at these and I said, wow, this is deep. Like, this is really deep. And I know Jesus, is telling me something really important here, because he's got all these people. You're going to tell him something really important. Here it is. But it's kind of like handing somebody the Bible and saying, the answers are all in here. Go get it. I have these, I know this is really important stuff. Jesus is telling me something here, but what do I do with this? I read this, it's wise, it's deep, but what am I supposed to do with this? And so these are not just wise words. What we have discovered is that this is actually a roadmap for, if you live these principles that Jesus gave us in the Beatitudes, this is where true healing comes from. This is where the abundant life comes from. So it's just a matter of understanding how what Jesus gave us here is actually a roadmap, a plan, that if you follow this, if you do what he says here, these are action items. This is not just a checklist of wise things. These are actually action items that you can live out and follow these principles. If you follow these principles, then you will experience joy and peace and victory, and it will change your life. So that's what we'll be talking about next week, is the 8 principles of Celebrate Recovery, which are based on these exact Beatitudes. So, I'm not going to go through them all, but, realize I'm not God, admit that I'm powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing. And happy are those who know they're spiritually full. Each one of the principles of Celebrate Recovery is based on and derived from and is entirely fed by the Beatitudes. So we'll unpack this next week. So I encourage you to come next week, because if you're going to get anything from this, it's going to be learning what these principles from the Sermon on the Mount mean and how you can live them out. So if you'll notice that as you read down the page, in the first letter of every sentence, realize I'm not God, earnestly believe, consciously choose, openly examine, voluntarily submit, evaluate all my relationships, reserve a daily time with God, yield myself to God. You may have noticed that it actually spells out the word recovery, because Celebrate Recovery is big on acrostics. So if you get to know and love one thing about Celebrate Recovery, there's a lot of acrostics. So, but I thought that was a good one. So yeah, I would just encourage you to come back next week, learn more about the pathway to peace, and we're going to dive deeper into these 8 principles taken from the Beatitudes, and we'll explore how we can use them to, actually make them practical rules for living in our daily lives that will help us in our recovery, help us, help lead us into the abundant life, help free us from repeating the mistakes of the past over and over. I'm just going to take us back quickly to Pastor Eric's sermon about the 2 roads. You have a choice. Which road will you take? Which room are you going to choose to live in? So, you're going to take the pleasing God, trying harder, trying to do it in your own strength, or you're going to do the trusting God. Are you going to live behind a mask? Everything's fine. No, I'm fine. How many people have you heard say that? Are you going to be isolating you in your struggle because you're not going to share it with others? Or are you going to take the mask off? Are you going to keep working to sin less so that God will love you? Or are you going to trust that you're already a delight to him, and then you and God can work on it together? Are you going to focus on pleasing God, or are you going to rejoice in the cross, trusting in its wonderful effect? So are you going to trust that you are who God says you are in Christ? Like Pastor Eric this morning said, do you believe that you're a well-loved son or daughter of the King? And if you do, then you need to go down the trusting God. So all that to say, let's close with the serenity prayer, and then we can have any questions. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. And I will say that 15 years ago, knowing that this prayer was by Reinhold Niebuhr, won me $5 in a journey class. This was back when the journey class was before the church was remodeled, and somebody said, who wrote the serenity prayer? And I won a $5 gift card. So that's one for the win right there. But that is an awesome prayer. I would encourage you, if you are struggling, try praying the serenity prayer, the full version, because even though it's not scripture, it is amazing. It really does center you on who you are in your relationship with God, and taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, and taking it one moment at a time, and living that with God, by your side. So just encourage you to check that out. Like I said, the pitch for next week, come back and learn all about the 8 principles taken from the Beatitudes, and how you can actually take it from just being wise words on a page that Jesus spoke to actually something that you can live out in your daily life that will bring you closer to him. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Nick, that was amazing. Thank you so much. Can you do me a favor and unshare your screen or stop screen sharing so that way people can see everyone? And if there are no, if anyone has a question to ask Nick, please unmute yourself.
I've got George here in the room.
How do we get on the mailing list?
For Celebrate Recovery? Absolutely, yeah. You can email me if you want. You can email the church, info@southparkchurch.org. You can email me directly, Nicholas S. Powell, NICHOLAS, POWELL, @gmail.com. You can email Stephanie Mejia. Stephanie's on the call. Stephanie, maybe you can drop your email address in the chat, so that folks online can get that. Yeah, definitely. If you don't, or you can just hit up myself or Stephanie or one of the other CR leaders. and we'll get you on the list. What we send out emails with the Zoom meeting links, but every Monday at 7 p.m. we're meeting in this room and on Zoom. So we'll send you the link if you get on the email list, and obviously you'll learn about upcoming teachings or testimonies and things like that. Great question. Thanks, George. Anyone else? Wow, I must have covered a lot of territory. That's kind of a slightly numb, shocked sort of, everybody's kind of like, whoa, that was a lot. So
I thought I saw, did I see somebody raise their hand in Zoom?
Hi, that was me. I was just going to ask if it was going to be available by Zoom. How would I get the information and the link and all?
yeah, absolutely. Stephanie is on the Zoom call. I see that. Stephanie, I see, I don't know if you've dropped it into the chat. I see there's something in the chat here. You can go to info@southparkchurch.org. You can also email our South Park Church CR group directly. Thank you, Stephanie. We have our own email address, southparkchurchcr@gmail.com, southparkchurchcr@gmail.com. And if you email us that, then as Stephanie said, she'll send, it's in the chat on Zoom right now. I don't know if you guys
I
can.
will also send it out in an email to everybody as well.
Okay, sounds good. Not sure how I'd have to, the folks in the, there we go, okay. Sorry, folks in the room were not seeing the Zoom, but now you should be able to see everything in the Zoom. But like I said, southparkchurchcr@gmail.com. That's monitored by the CR leaders. But yeah, so great question. Would love to see all you guys there on Monday nights. So
see you next week.
Yeah, sounds good. Awesome. Well, thank you all. Appreciate it. I apologize if we ran a bit long, but love doing this. Great being with you guys. Thank you all. God bless. Take care. Thank you. Okay, do we jump off the Zoom? Yep.